Hey guys, in today's video I bring you a stunning and moving account, the story of Serafina Vale, a 50-year-old social worker who literally came to death's door in Seattle and returned with an urgent message about 6 prophetic events that will shape the future of humanity in 2025. What she experienced on the threshold between life and death will chill your soul and challenge everything you believe about faith, hope, and destiny. So before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, so you don't miss any content like this, and activate the bell to receive all notifications. Now get ready to embark on this intense and transformative journey, and don't forget to comment below which city you're watching. My name is Serafina Vale, and until that March 2021, I believed I understood the meaning of compassion. Having lived in a cycle of giving and caring for 50 years, I never imagined that my own story would take such an extraordinary turn, and that I would have to share it with the world. Today I sit before these words not as a social worker alone, but as someone who has crossed the threshold between life and death, received revelations that will shape humanity's near future, and has been charged with an urgent mission to alert every heart to remain steadfast in faith. The account you are about to read chronicles a moment when my entire understanding was upended, a near-death experience that not only saved my soul, but redefined the purpose of my existence. I want you to read each word with the same weight of disbelief that I felt when I lived them, but also with the same hope that was born inside me when everything seemed lost. On that day in March, the community center in Seattle felt like a microcosm of urgency and pain. I had arrived at 8 in the morning, greeting families seeking shelter and colleagues who shared my mission. Over the hours, each case consumed a piece of my soul, faces marked by dismay, voices choked by anguish. I felt the weight of their lives as if they were my own, a burden that I willingly carried but that was beginning to erode my own resistance. Around 2:15, as I was reviewing a homeless boy's dossier, a familiar discomfort rose in my chest, a sign I had ignored so many times. First, a slight tingling. Then a growing tightness that took over my entire chest. My heart raced in an irregular rhythm, and breathing became a painful effort. I looked around for help, but people were too busy to notice my suffering until my legs gave out. In a second that seemed eternal, I felt my body give way. I fell to the ground with a thud and heard Maria Chen's shrill scream, her voice filled with panic and love. She grabbed my hand tightly, begging me to resist, as other employees ran towards us. My world began to darken, as if someone was slowly turning off the lights around me. Then, absolute silence. There was no pain, no despair, just a sense of detachment so gentle it made me think I was floating in an ethereal space. The frantic noise of footsteps and voices faded away, replaced by a welcoming void that enveloped me like a warm hug. It was in this moment of complete absence of stimuli that I realized that something much bigger than myself was coming. And it was there, on that threshold between existing and not existing, that my body lay vulnerable, but my consciousness was preparing to cross borders it had never imagined knowing. When I lost feeling in my physical body, an indescribable peace enveloped me. It was like emerging from the depths of a turbulent ocean onto the calm surface of a crystal-clear lake. I found myself floating a few inches above the cold floor of the community center, watching Maria kneeling beside me, tears glistening in her eyes as she held my hand, unaware that I no longer felt pain or fear. The confused screams of the medical team became distant echoes. I didn't have to strain to see. Every detail was vividly clear: the sweat on the nurse's face, the pained look in Dr. Elliot Monroe's eyes as he administered the defibrillator, the tinkling of the life support machines being connected to my body. Yet instead of horror, it all seemed part of a sacred ritual, conducted by invisible, benevolent forces. Then a soft light, neither dazzling nor distant, appeared in front of me. I felt a presence so warm and loving that human words failed to describe it. There was no defined form, just a luminous essence that communicated without speaking. I soon perceived this presence as Jesus, not the Jesus of still images in books, but someone whose kindness radiated with tangible intensity. Without sound, He conveyed complete understanding and acceptance. In his presence, I felt every guilt, every pain, every tear I carried being bathed in absolute forgiveness. And then came the visions, not as fragmented scenes, but as immutable certainties etched directly into my soul. He showed me 6 events that would happen in 2025, each a pulse of light and meaning. As the vision unfolded, an inner voice, soft and firm, reinforced, "Serafina, you must return and tell what you saw. The world must be ready." Despite the immensity of that call, I felt no fear, just a deep conviction that my life would never be mine again. In an instant that seemed simultaneously brief and eternal, the presence began to move away, and my consciousness was drawn back into my body. The transition was like a gradual awakening from a vivid dream. First, I felt the weight of my chest, then the sound of the heart monitors, and finally, the comforting pressure of Maria's hand holding mine. Upon opening my eyes, I was greeted by the surprised and relieved look of Dr. Elliot Monroe, whose voice sounded distant but comforting. "Serafina? Can you hear me?" Just a weak nod was my response. As I reoriented myself to the physical world, the visions that had been imprinted on my soul remained as vivid as the racing pulse of my heart. That night, already in the hospital room, I asked Maria and Pastor Gabriel Finch to sit next to me. The soft light from the lamp illuminated my pale face as I began to describe, in a trembling voice, what I had witnessed. He showed me 6 events that will happen in 2025, I began, the words coming out in reverent whispers. First, the big lie. There will be a wave of false teaching so seductive that millions will be led astray from the truth. It will not just be religion, philosophies, social media, even science will be distorted to confuse hearts. Maria held my hand tightly, her eyes teary. Gabriel was frantically writing down notes in his notebook. Then the Great Awakening, an explosion of the Holy Spirit in unexpected places, prisons, corporations, universities. Sudden conversions, but accompanied by increasing persecution for anyone who dares to profess the faith. My voice cracked as I continued. The third is the Great Shock, political crises that destroy governments, devastating economic collapses, unprecedented natural disasters. Faith will be tested to the limit, and many will lose everything, homes, jobs, even family members. Dr. Monroe, who had come closer to listen, frowned, torn between medical concern and curiosity. I didn't hesitate to continue. The fourth event is the Great Harvest. Despite repression, I see millions being reached. Pastors and lay people risking arrests, even executions, to share hope. My throat went dry before I revealed the fifth. The Great Separation. The moment when the truth will become so clear that the sincere will separate themselves from the deceived. It will be painful, but necessary to purify God's people. Finally, I looked down, feeling the weight of the last vision. And the rise of the Antichrist. A charismatic leader will emerge offering peace and worldly solutions, but he will be the greatest deceiver in history. A heavy silence filled the room. Maria cried softly. Gabriel looked at the ceiling as if seeking divine confirmation. Dr. Monroe, speechless, squeezed my hand tightly. At that moment, I understood that my mission had begun, and that every second from then on would be dedicated to preparing hearts for what was to come. Little by little, the days after that night seemed to drag on in a limbo between disbelief and urgency. Back in my hospital room, I woke up each morning with the weight of visions pounding in my mind as my body struggled to regain strength. Medical tests confirmed that I had suffered sudden cardiac arrest, the result of years of ignoring signs of emotional and physical exhaustion, but none of them could explain what I knew I had experienced beyond the reach of science. Dr. Elliot Monroe, now less rigid in his skepticism, visited me daily. He insisted on reviewing every electrocardiogram and echocardiogram result, looking for any anomaly that would justify my collapse. I watched him write down cold data in his medical record, knowing that the truth he carried had no place in graphs or diagnoses. Silently, he began to see something different in my eyes. Not madness, but a deep determination that disconcerted him. Outside the hospital, rumors were circulating quickly. Some colleagues whispered that I had suffered a hallucination due to exhaustion. others that my faith had saved me. Maria Chen remained by my side, reading my notes as I tirelessly repeated every detail of the visions. Between us, conversations flowed with a new intensity, confidences about doubts, fears, and a hope that, little by little, blossomed. Pastor Gabriel Finch became my spiritual advisor, helping me transform what I had been given into written form. Together, we wrote a manuscript that sought to describe each prophetic event in a clear and accessible way. He constantly reminded me to pray for wisdom and courage, reinforcing that my experience was not just for me, but for thousands who would need encouragement amid the coming chaos. As I gathered evidence, news clippings about fake gurus, statistics on unexpected conversions, and reports of emerging crises, I felt the weight of responsibility growing. Each new sign of the fulfillment of the visions fueled my conviction that I could not remain silent. However, the most painful challenge was facing looks of disbelief and even hostility, even among those who previously admired my work. Still, in every prayer and on every written page, a certainty was established in my heart. No matter the opposing voices, my mission was to communicate what was entrusted to me, and time to prepare the world was running out. In the spring of 2022, small tremors began to shake my conviction, signals that were subtle but impossible to ignore. I was meeting with Gabriel in his office when he showed me an article about a digital influencer who had released a series of videos promising the hidden truth about human evolution, ideas as seductive as they were dangerous, attracting millions of followers in a matter of days. My heart sank as I recognized the essence of the big lie there. Over the next few weeks, I compiled newspaper clippings and social media links that illustrated how distorted doctrines spread quickly, turning people away from basic spiritual values. In parallel, reports began to emerge of arrests and dismissals of Christians who refused to adopt ideologies contrary to their faith, a harbinger of what I had seen as persecution. Each piece of evidence confirmed, step by step, the fidelity of the vision. In August of that year, I witnessed something that took my breath away. At an academic conference in Seattle, a group of students spontaneously shared testimonies of sudden conversion, some claiming to have encountered Christ in dreams or during near-death experiences of their own. The stories resonated with the intensity of the Great Awakening, and my chest filled with simultaneous hope and fear. But not everything was light. In October, natural disasters began to gain unusual prominence, devastating floods in the interior of the state, followed by forest fires that consumed hectares of land. In meetings with Maria, our conversations became more urgent, marked by prayer and pattern analysis. Each event seemed part of a larger puzzle. It was then that I received an email from Nathaniel Pierce, an investigative journalist who had been following my story from the hospital. He had gathered accounts of persecuted religious leaders in distant countries, arbitrary arrests, violence, and even deaths. "All of this is happening faster than we imagined," he wrote. I felt a lump in my throat as I digested his words. What had previously seemed distant and abstract now manifested itself before my eyes. That night I knelt by the bed and, with silent tears, gave my fear and determination to the Lord. The conviction that had been born in the emergency room of the community center was now consolidated into concrete action, documenting every sign, mobilizing hearts and preparing souls to face whatever came. The prophetic clock ticked forward, and the world began to change. In February 2023, something unprecedented began to take shape, an evangelization movement so broad that it seemed to defy all cultural, political, and geographic barriers. I was in a virtual conference with pastors from different continents when Pastor Finch interrupted the session, pointing to the screen where live videos of small groups gathered in countries where the Christian faith was officially repressed were appearing. Women and men, whispering prayers in underground churches, shared messages of hope on cell phones, even though they knew they could face arrest or violence. My chest ached as I heard accounts of Christians risking their lives to carry the word forward, just like the vision I received. In Uganda, pastors were arrested for simply distributing Bibles. In China, young people shared the gospel hidden in kitchens. In the Middle East, families gathered in homes, singing hymns in low voices. Each testimony was a bright spark against the growing darkness of the world. At the same time, reports showed an exponential increase in missionary organizations using technology to reach previously inaccessible populations, satellites relaying preaching in remote areas, apps that translated Bible verses in real time, encryption networks allowing secure communications between persecuted Christians. It was as if, in the face of repression, a spiritual strategy coordinated by a greater force emerged. Sitting at my laptop, I felt a mix of awe and urgency. I called Maria, who cried as she heard each story, and Nathaniel, who was beginning to draft an investigative piece on this global phenomenon. Together, we decided to create a report that compiled this evidence, not only to document prophetic fulfillment, but to inspire churches around the world to support the cause of our persecuted brothers. But the emotional weight was great. Each story of courage carried with it a silent lament for the human cost, families torn apart, lives cut short, blood spilled. In moments of prayer, I felt the Spirit comforting me, but also strengthening my conviction that the great harvest would be marked by sacrifice and triumph. During that time, I realized that my mission expanded beyond a simple warning. I needed to mobilize the global church to act, pray, send resources, defend the persecuted, and prepare hearts for the challenges ahead. The inner voice I had heard on the threshold of death now pulsed in every beat of my heart. The time to harvest souls had arrived, even at the greatest cost. The months that followed became an intense period of discernment and painful conviction. The great separation began silently but inexorably. In January 2024, during a weekly meeting at the community center where I worked, I realized something subtle but decisive. Former colleagues, once united by the purpose of service, now exhibited conflicting worldviews that reflected the growing spiritual schism I had seen in my vision. Friendly conversations became heated debates about ideologies and beliefs, exposing deep fissures in hearts that previously beat to the same beat. In my own life, the test was more intimate. My younger sister, Elaine, a gentle but skeptical soul, began to question my faith in increasingly pointed ways. "Do you really believe that the world will split between true and false?" she asked me in a trembling voice on a rainy afternoon in Seattle. His words held fear, not just because of what I claimed, but because of the cost it would take to our family ties. Meanwhile, reports of divided churches and shattered communities came in through Nathaniel and international networks. Pastors, who once led close-knit congregations, now faced fierce disputes among members who refused to accept doctrines considered extreme. In many churches, minority groups were excluded or stopped attending, marking the beginning of a painful spiritual purification. My own congregation was no exception. During a Sunday service, Pastor Finch's words about the urgency of separating what was true from what was deceptive provoked tense reactions. Some wept with regret, others left in silence, hurt and confused. I felt the weight of every decision made at that moment. It was like watching the unfolding of a suffering necessary to strengthen the faith of those who would remain. In the midst of this split, my faith deepened. I realized that separation was not an act of human judgment, but of divine clarity. A painful yet liberating process, designed to reveal the authenticity of each heart. He prayed for those who walked away, asking them to be led into the light, even if they were now walking in shadows. At the end of that turbulent year, I understood that the world would no longer be the same. The Great Separation was not just a future event. It was the reality unfolding before my eyes, setting the stage for the greatest challenge yet to come. In mid-2025, the air seemed thick with an almost palpable tension, as if the entire world was holding its breath in the face of something monumental. The news carried reports of a charismatic leader emerging on the global stage, presenting himself as a peacemaker amid the intensifying political and economic chaos. He spoke eloquently, promising unity, prosperity, and security, while drawing crowds in packed squares and virtual broadcasts that reached billions. I vividly remembered the last vision. This man was not the solution, but the greatest deceiver in history. the Antichrist. I saw your eyes full of magnetism, seducing hearts eager for hope. Now the entire world seemed mesmerized by his smooth rhetoric, unable to see that his peace was false, built on compromises that undermined freedom of expression and punished anyone who dared question it. In Seattle, heated debates dominated social media and community meetings. Friends and even family began to disappear in silent protests against measures imposed under the pretext of the greater good. Maria sent me urgent messages, reporting that local churches were being pressured to sign a public pact of loyalty, a seemingly innocent act, but one that echoed the prophetic signal of submission. That night, I sat outside my apartment window, watching the city lights twinkle like fuzzy stars in an urban sky. I remembered the warm embrace I felt during my near-death experience, that love that could never compare to the deceptive allure that now captivated millions. In prayer, I cried out for clarity and courage to stand firm. The first signs of resistance were already appearing. Small groups of believers refused the pact, even though they knew they could lose everything: jobs, reputation, even freedom. Clandestine meetings were organized in basements and abandoned houses, where words of hope echoed amidst the darkness. I knew my role was to strengthen these souls, share my testimony, and remind them of the promise of ultimate victory. As the world bowed before the false Messiah, my voice continued to proclaim the truth, not to incite fear but to offer hope and prepare hearts for the true light that, despite everything, would never be extinguished. If you like this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.